O'Brien. And I wanted to remind you, we are being recorded so that other people in the future will have an opportunity who want to participate in IBAC to know how this kind of thing works. I've been an Uber judge for probably almost 10 years. I am a business executive coach. I focus in leadership and culture, values, and how organizations can connect better. I would like to introduce Maria next, and then Allison, and then Justin.
Hi, good morning, everyone. My name is Maria Sonnen. Pleasure to be here. Good to see you all. I've been involved in IBAC for probably about 10 years, not as an Uber judge as Gail, but I've judged. And I am currently the ethics program manager for BAE Systems, which is a defense contractor, and I am located in Southern New Hampshire. Good to see you all.
I'm Alison Taunton-Rigby, and this is my second year doing it, so I'm not an Uber judge at all, but it's fun. I enjoy it. I'm on the Ethics Advisory Board at Bentley College, Bentley University. My background is biotechnology, so I have more experience with sort of biological ethics, medical and bioethics. I live in Boston, and I currently sit on a number of corporate boards, and Boston Children's Hospital being one of them. And I look forward to hearing your presentation.
Good morning. My name is Justin Goodkind. As Tom mentioned, I participated as a student twice. I worked for Tom in the Business and Ethics Department at Loyola Marymount University. I've now worked for several different startups, most recently one that was acquired by Plaid, a large financial technology company. And so that's where I live and work today, is for Plaid. If you use a Venmo account, you're using our technology, and I do identity verification and anti-money laundering software sales. So that is my brief background. Looking forward to the presentation.
Thank you very much, Justin. It would be terrific if team members introduce themselves and be clear with us about what you wrote in your paper, just so that we all know our role as well as your role.
Hello, so we are the Crusader Consultants. I am Elizabeth Galeriou. I am an accounting major and a first-year student. For clarification, you all are the board of directors of McDonald's, and I will now let my partners introduce themselves.
Hi, I'm Nicole Simmons. I'm also a freshman, and I'm an economics major.
Hi, I'm Martha. I'm also a freshman, and I'm a math major.
Hi, I'm Molly. I'm also a freshman, and I'm a math major.
We're excited to have Crusader Consultants with us this morning. And I'm assuming that somebody on your team is going to have, or that all of you are going to be watching the time. I will set 30 minutes because you have that extra time if you need it. And I'll start the clock when you start officially your presentation.
I believe we will be having Martha share the screen.
Okay.
Would you sacrifice your health for cheaper chicken? Hello, we're the Crusader Consultants. We are here in front of you, the board of McDonald's directors, as your unsustainable chicken farming practices have led many residents of relevant communities to come to us with concerns for their health. Our mission is to protect the health of these people and their environment by imploring you to be more accountable for your decisions. Today, we will be informing you how exactly your unsustainable operations of CAFOs have impacted your stakeholders the ethical modifications we urge you to take moving forward, and the results of doing so, which we believe will benefit not only society, but also the company. Our agenda for today is to present to you the research that we've done on CAFOs, our solution, and the ethical, financial, and legal considerations.
So what is a CAFO? CAFOs are concentrated animal feeding operations that raise animals at a high density to produce milk, meat, and eggs for mass consumption. To be classified as a CAFO, it at first has to be considered an AFO, which is an animal feeding operation. But the primary difference between the two is the number, size, and type of animals that they raise, as well as how they discharge waste. For example, a CAFO discharges waste so that it comes in contact with the water supply, unlike an AFO, which leads us into our next slide. Why are CAFOs bad? When considering the environmental impact, as I mentioned in the previous slide, CAFOs dispose of their waste so that it comes in contact with the water supply, which can pose a serious threat to the groundwater. This is such a serious problem because human sewage treatment plants are required, but they don't require these plants for animal waste. And manure applied too frequently in one area can overwhelm the absorptive capacity of the ground and have the waste runoff seep into the water supply. And it is known that states with high concentrations of CAFOs have typically experienced about 20 to 30 serious water quality problems a year due to this mismanagement manure. Also, pathogens produced from CAFOs also pose a serious threat to the groundwater, as they can survive longer down there due to the colder temperatures and lack of sunlight. And similarly, traces of ammonia can be found in the surface water near CAFOs, which causes a serious threat to aquatic life as it causes a depletion from the water, resulting in the killing of aquatic life. And for the health impacts, it has also been discovered that CAFOs pollute the air quality in surrounding communities for CAFOs, which has induced asthma and other serious respiratory problems in the citizens. And this is because CAFOs can typically produce between 2,600 to 1.6 million tons of manure a year. And ammonia specific, well, this manure can include ammonia, hydrogen sulfide, and methane. And ammonia specifically is quickly absorbed by the upper airways of the body and can cause mucus buildup, severe coughing, as well as possible scarring of the airways. And research has shown that as much as 30% of factory farm workers can develop occupational asthma, acute and chronic bronchitis, and organic toxic dust syndrome. And when thinking specifically of chicken CAFOs, CAFOs in general generate about more nitrogen than the federal standard. And chicken farms make up about 60% of these operations, which causes them to exceed acceptable nitrogen levels. And similarly, studies have shown that 25% of factory farm workers have reported respiratory problems due to the overexposure to a chemical endotoxin, which is a high bacteria known to be in higher concentrations, specifically in chicken CAFOs. And then we have a picture on the next slide, I believe. And then this is just a picture of a CAFO that has discharged their waste into the pond behind all the farms. And the bacteria in the pond has eaten away at the chemicals in the waste to produce this pinky color, which is obviously not desired for any body of water.
So our solution is that McDonald's uses its buying power to demand that your suppliers abandon their concentrated animal feeding practices in regard to chicken, and that McDonald's uses third-party audits or internal audits to ensure that your suppliers comply. Now, my next slide. So your suppliers need to do this by lowering or decreasing the amount of chickens kept in a single poultry barn, and they may need to invest in better waste management technologies in order to rid themselves of their CAFO status and become an AFO. Now to my next slide. further parts of our solution are that you must, as McDonald's, provide full disclosure regarding the entire state of your chicken supply chain in order to encourage transparency amongst yourselves, your competitors, and poultry suppliers. We also recommend that McDonald's McDonald's works with other fast food chains to help them implement these changes as well. Also, if you are to enact a solution, it is important to acknowledge the financial pressure that your chicken farmers face. Since Tyson, like most poultry processors in the US, determines the base pay for its farmers based off of the size of their poultry barns, it inherently encourages concentrated animal feeding practices. So to combat this, you should offer bonuses based off of environmental performance to your farmers. Now, on my next slide, we will talk about why you have the power to do this. So with a 21.4% market share as of 2019, you are the front runner in the fast food industry. As an industry leader, it is up to you to set an example. If McDonald's sets a standard, then everyone else is going to be forced to follow. If, for example, McDonald's provides full disclosure, then people are going to say, well, why isn't Burger King doing that? Or why isn't Chick-fil-A providing full disclosure? However, some of your competitors have already made strides in their chicken welfare. Burger King, your top competitor, for example, has promised to decrease the stocking density of their poultry barns, which means that they will decrease the amount of chickens kept per poultry barn. You can become the gold standard that everyone is compared to, like how you are the Golden Arches. However, you need to do more. Now, Molly will tell you why this solution aligns with your values. I think
it's just, yeah, the next, yeah. Here we have an excerpt from the Code of Conduct for Suppliers from McDonald's. And we just wanted to highlight that you use the words transparency as well as the actions of our business partners can be attributed to McDonald's. And we just wanted to highlight, show that this is something you hope to attribute to your business model and that they just coincide with our solution in general. So we suggest that these changes should be implemented in approximately 5 to 7 years. According to the poultry site, broiler houses typically take about 10 to 15 years to depreciate and can be used for as long as 30 years. However, 10 to 15 years is far too long a time to wait for change, nor is it necessary to wait that long. 5 to 7 years should award your company and your suppliers plenty of time to work together, strategize, and implement the changes we've suggested. It should also allow for all equipment to be at least half depreciated. While we are aware that McDonald's has already incorporated third-party audits for its chicken suppliers and has established a Chicken Sustainability Advisory Council, we unfortunately have reason to believe that these efforts are not enough. Your company provides little disclosure regarding the work and members of this Chicken Sustainability Advisory Council. As you know, its two leading academics are Dr. Temple Grandin and Dr. Harry Blockquist, who are both pictured on the slide. However, Dr. Temple Grandin's work has mainly been geared towards cattle, while we're focused on chicken farming, and Harry Block's work is limited to Europe. Also, nowhere in the current research portion of Dr. Block's personal website does he mention being a member of McDonald's Chicken Sustainability Advisory Council, nor does he mention working with them. Your company merely highlights the progress they've made and the goals they've set, but does not provide any detailed reporting. We just have a quote from your website about what your company reports as in progress in regards to their chicken welfare goals. Our commitments to sourcing chickens raised with improved welfare outcomes impact more than 70% of our global chicken supply and will be fully implemented on or before 2024. It is not defined what quote improved welfare outcomes encompasses, nor is it specified what percentage of its US supply chain this will affect. It is vital for your company to disclose both the good and the bad in order to achieve transparency and credibility. Additionally, concentrated animal feeding operations can still exist under these quote improved welfare outcomes because they do, and your company has previously refused to sign the Better Chicken Commitment, which some of your competitors have. Completely abolishing the use of CAFOs in regards to chicken is the only way for McDonald's to truly improve on the issues we have outlined. And since your company already has a Chicken Sustainability Advisory Council established, we see this as a positive and can be used as a tool to implement the changes we've suggested.
I believe it is the next slide. Yes, okay. So now I will talk about the benefits and the consequences of the solution. So first, for the benefits, by advocating for better chicken farming practices, McDonald's can leverage its advocacy as a marketing tactic, and you will become the face of the movement. Simply by educating the public, providing full disclosure, and by making your stance on this issue known, McDonald's will be able to improve its goodwill and its brand recognition before your suppliers even have the time to fully implement these changes. Now, on my next slide, I will talk about further benefits. So, some more benefits are that by providing full disclosure, you will eliminate the risk of being quote unquote exposed like you were by Carl Icahn, as I'm sure you remember, for needing more time to complete farming changes. And by providing full disclosure, you will be more likely to meet your targets on time thanks to pressure from the public. The interesting thing about the Carl Icahn situation, though, as I think we skipped a slide, should be before this one. Yes, this one, is that after Carl Icahn exposed this issue to the public, and after he demanded more robust animal welfare for your pigs, he was successful in nominating 2 candidates to your upcoming board election. And the stock price went up. So it is clear that shareholders want improved animal welfare policy. And Carl Icahn is only one example of an activist investor. As more activist investors choose to focus on McDonald's, it is important that you address these issues sooner rather than later. You need to listen to your stakeholder demands for transparency and accountability in your supply chain. If you do so, your shareholders will reward you, and you will be able to attract ESG investors. Also, it's important to note that in today's world, companies are being held more accountable for their supply chain when trying to obtain financing. Now, on my next slide, we will discuss further benefits. Yes, okay. So, another benefit is that your chickens will have better animal welfare policy, or better animal welfare. They will be able to exhibit natural behaviors such as pecking, perching, and dust bathing. And research accepted by the European Commission shows that when broiler chickens are able to exhibit natural behaviors, they are healthier and they are less prone to diseases that would be harmful to humans if one were to eat one of these chickens. So there would be less chance of recall. Also, some more benefits are that thanks to our solution, waste runoff there will be reduced waste runoff, and asthma rates in the surrounding communities will decrease. Now, some consequences are that it is timely, like we mentioned. There is a cost involved and a potential customer loss that we will get more into in our financial section. But now Nicole will discuss the ethical implications.
So we believe it is important to note the ethical implications of both the problem and the solution. So CFOs are clearly an ethical issue because they go against McDonald's duty of care by neglecting the damages done to their stakeholders and willingly damaging them. For example, inflicting communities with asthma as a result of business practices clearly violates duty of care. Your company's current actions in this case are not ethically defensible because they do not create any greater good, nor do they promote the general welfare. By eliminating concentrating feeding practice in your poultry suppliers and implementing full disclosure, your company will be on its way to corporate citizenship by setting standards and changing the game for the fast food industry. Your company will also become significantly more sustainable, and you will be able to right the wrongs impacting many of your stakeholders. Although the solution may impose additional costs on McDonald's, which we will get into more in the financial section, it is the most ethical solution because the amount of benefits that result. The environment will benefit because waste runoff and air pollution will subside. Surrounding communities will benefit from lower rates of asthma and a better air quality overall. Management will benefit from potential marketing campaigns, and chicken's health will benefit from the sustainable farming practices, which in turn will lead to healthier poultry for your customers to eat. Demographically, the communities who are most affected by these chicken CFOs are poor rural communities in the South that tend to have less access to healthcare and are less likely to have health insurance. This makes them even more vulnerable to the negative health risks that can result from CFOs. With all this information in mind, we believe that board member Lloyd H. Dean, as the CEO of a Catholic nonprofit health system, may appreciate the medical and health benefits that will result from our proposed solution.
So before we get into the financial implications, it is important to acknowledge that this ethical issue stems from the financial demand for low-cost chicken. So by addressing this issue, it will naturally increase the cost of the chicken. However, this should not be a deterrent for you because because of your financial status. Because you have positive operating cash flows, that gives you a cushion so you can afford to decrease your margins to absorb any increase in cost. Also, with a gross margin of approximately 44.6% for 2021 and a profit margin of approximately 32.5% for 2021, you have incredibly high margins that you can afford to decrease, especially considering that the average profit margin for your industry is roughly 6 to 9%. Now, on my next slide, it will show a chart. This is your free cash flows for the past 4 years, with $7 billion in free cash flows for 2021, $9 billion being provided by operating activities, and $2 billion being spent on capital expenditures. So this goes to show that you have positive operating cash flows that allow you to decrease your margins. Also, we should keep in mind that because the solution only impacts your chicken supply chain, you can spread out the cost. You can spread out the cost across all of your products rather than simply those that use chicken. Now, Nicole will get more into the costs of the solution.
So there will be no cost of compliance with laws since there's minimal legislation. However, there will be other costs that result from our proposed solution. Farmers will need to be paid more per pound because they'll produce less out of each house. Suppliers will be faced with equipment costs, restructuring costs, and may need to buy more land if they wish to keep up with McDonald's current outputs. Your company may need to help finance some of these changes their suppliers put in place by doing things such as providing low-cost loans. However, the Natural Resources Conservation Service may provide financial assistance for landowners who want to adopt agricultural practices that are ethical and environmentally sustainable. McDonald's will, however, have to pay the bonuses to its farmers for environmental performance. But because of increased goodwill and brand recognition, McDonald's will be able to attract new customers. This may help your company attract more millennials, which, as you know, you've been struggling to do in the past. While there are additional costs, our solution also helps to avoid potential costs that may arise, such as lawsuits and the frequent death of animals and concentrating feeding operations due to their current poor conditions.
So in the United States, the rights for animals include the Humane Slaughter Act, the Animal Welfare Act, and the 28-hour law. However, none of these acts include protections for chickens. This means that the breeding, rearing, sale, transportation, and slaughter of chickens are simply not regulated. Despite this, McDonald's does not have an excuse to continue with their harmful practices. They should go beyond just the bare minimum of animal treatment and set an example through extending the protections that grant these animal rights to chickens as well. One way that they could do this is by mimicking what the EU, the UK, and New Zealand has done to ensure fair treatment among chickens. They've developed a framework of basic freedoms for chicken, including freedom from hunger, thirst, freedom from pain, injury, discomfort, and freedom to express natural behavior. Not only should chickens be entitled to these freedoms, but this will also translate to healthier poultry and reduce the risk of asthma that results from unethical farming practices. Also, in the United States, due to intensive lobbying, there are very few CAFO regulations put in place. The current regulations solely impose that CAFOs are regulated by the EPA under the Clean Water Act. This requires CAFOs to provide only a minimal and very basic outline of their protocols for discharges of pollutants into the waters, as well as quality standards for surface waters. Therefore, this does not require CAFOs to be entirely transparent about their practices. Furthermore, according to the EPA, the USDA's goal for AFOs and for CAFO owners is for them to take only voluntary actions to minimize potential air and water pollutants from storage facilities, confinement areas, and land application areas. So therefore, the USDA doesn't really provide a lot of motivation for CAFOs and for AFOs to be accountable and to enact change. And in the past, Keystone Foods, which is McDonald's biggest supplier, was penalized by the EPA for violating the Clean Air Act. So our proposed solution would address this issue and prevent something like this from happening again. And additionally, if McDonald's implemented the change to extend more rights to chickens, this could set a standard for the rest of society and possibly lead to new, very necessary regulations to be enacted. And in 2019, the Farm System Reform Act was proposed by Senator Cory Booker, which called for the immediate and permanent moratorium on the construction and expansion of all large CAFOs, and outlined a plan to close all existing large CAFOs by 2040. And while this bill failed to gain Republican support, it demonstrates the potential future for more sustainable CAFOs in the United States. And lastly, we just want to point out that there are no laws or regulations that would be violated by our proposed solution.
So in conclusion, we implore you to enact our solution and address this blatant ethical issue. Is it fair for you to impose lifelong medical condition upon surrounding communities, or is it fair for you to pollute the environment for your own personal gain? You have the opportunity to become the first entity in its industry to tackle this issue head on. You have the opportunity to use your power for good and your resources to enact change. And we believe that you should hold yourselves, your industry, and your suppliers accountable. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm wondering if you are aware of the progress that we have made as a company. For example, in parts of Europe, 100% of egg supply is cage-free. We have 60% now cage-free in the US, and we're moving further toward that goal. And in terms of animal housing, we've already, indicated that we are having goals that will allow us to, in the next couple of years, move forward. And I'm wondering why you didn't acknowledge that about what we've been doing.
So that is a great question and a good point. And that goes towards our point about the lack of transparency. Is that, as we mentioned, on your website, you highlight your goals and whatever progress you've made, but it's not comprehensive and it does not paint the entire or clear picture for people. And again, this relates to your situation with Carl Icahn. Same thing, goals were outlined. They did not line up. People did not know. There was a lack of transparency. And that's part of the issue. Again, part of the issue is also the lack of robust changes and the fact that despite these goals that you outline, they still do not address the issue. Yes, you have made progress in moving towards cage-free eggs. That does not necessarily mean that it's not from a CAFO, so that there's still going to be the negative health and environmental effects. And again, the major issue lies in the lack of transparency, in the lack of reporting, and in the fact that your suppliers are still concentrated animal feeding operations.
Thank you.
Can I ask you a question? I really appreciate your presentation. I've learned a lot from the presentation, but I have a concern because this is going to increase the cost of our products. And shouldn't we have our customers pay that cost? Or you suggest that we take it off our margins, which of course means that basically our investors are bearing the cost. But if it's the customers who want this, shouldn't they be sharing in the cost and the prices go up? So I'm curious as to what do you think is the fair way to share these additional costs?
I will address this issue because I spoke about the financial implications. So you could deal with this, any increase in price, any increase in cost of the chicken by increasing the price of your product. However, there is also the threat of potentially losing customers because your goods are now more expensive. So that's why we offer these solutions of spreading out the cost across all of your products or decreasing your margins because you can't afford to if fear of losing customers is deterring you from enacting the solution.
I hear what you say, but I'd like to, if we put all the cost on our investors, we'll lose our investors. And they're important to us too. As a board of directors, we have to report very directly to them. So, what is the fairest way of sharing these expenses?
So that's a good point about the investors. And that goes towards our point that your shareholders have shown that they value better animal welfare policy and that your stock price went up after more robust animal welfare was demanded. And like we mentioned, the solution will help you attract ESG investors, which is becoming increasingly more important in today's society. And so the cost of, so yes, there's going to be a cost. It will be over the course of several years, so it will be spread out across our timeline. And there are ways that you can handle it, how you choose, whether that's increasing your price or decreasing margins. But but investors should not be a concern because this can attract ESG investors, which is really becoming even more important today. And your shareholders have proven that they reward that.
So your team suggested that chicken houses or the operations of chicken houses could potentially buy more land. And I do think that is an option, but it's not always as simple of an endeavor as just, walking across the street or next door to get that land. Have you considered what that would mean if the chicken houses have to buy land that's some distance away? And the fossil fuels involved with additional transportation costs. the environmental impact of using additional fossil fuels, and simply the time cost of that as well.
So I believe my partner Nicole addressed this issue. So I will let her continue that solution further. This answer further. However, those once again are factors to consider. But we believe that the solution will, even if there are going to be other factors that need to be considered, and that we can also that you can consider by working with your suppliers, which is an inherent part of the solution, is working with them and mapping out these details. By doing so, you will create a better good. This solution will lead to a greater good, even if there are going to be other concerns or costs that we have to consider. And Nicole can get more into those because she spoke on this.
And Nicole, before you address that, just one other thing too. If I can't find land as a chicken house or chicken operator, and I'm being forced to spread out my operations still, then I may not be able to sell to McDonald's anymore if I can't meet their supply needs. Then what?
So we definitely do recognize that there are going to be issues that arise when it comes to getting more land. That's why we've suggested a 5 to 7 year timeline to allow McDonald's to work with suppliers through these issues. And we do want suppliers to definitely comply with abolishing CAFOs, but we don't want to be so cutthroat, and we understand there will be issues involved regarding finding more land, but we do think that overall the benefits outweigh the cost, the benefits of decreased air pollution in surrounding communities, the benefits of better health of the chickens, which in turn will lead to healthier poultry for your customers to eat. So we just suggest that you are willing to work with your suppliers over this timeline and work through these issues and hopefully come to a solution that will reap the most benefits for all parties involved.
So you mentioned earlier in your presentation that one of the things that we can do at McDonald's is to offer bonuses to our suppliers based on their efforts in the environmental waste management space. I guess my question, and I apologize if this is something that you've already covered, what would be the audit plan for that, and who's going to absorb the cost of continual auditing? Because it's one thing for, our suppliers to say today, 2022, we've done XYZ in order to decrease environmental waste, but what's the audit plan to make sure that that continues? Because we certainly don't want to be in a position where we're now marketing decreased CAFOs and then some undercover investigative journalist goes in and discovers our suppliers are still polluting. So can you speak a bit to that?
Yes, so great point. McDonald's currently does use third-party audits to ensure that your suppliers are complying with your current standards that are not outlined, which goes towards the lack of transparency. So the cost of the third-party audits or the internal audits should not be a deterrent because you already use third-party audits. The point about the auditing and
the cost, I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt, but the cost of those audits could go up if now we're asking the auditors to now audit, for water and waste management and all of that more than what we already paid the audit firm for.
Yes, that is simply going to be a cost, but we believe that the benefit of being transparent will outweigh that cost. And it's going to have to factor in your financial statements. However, again, there will be benefits because of that transparency. And one of those benefits will be that, like goes to one of your concerns about an undercover journalist discovering, a lie or an inconsistency in your supply chains, that transparency eliminates that risk, because it's not going to be something like a dirty secret or something undercover that someone has to expose. It's going to be out there in public information.
Also, we just want to point out that goodwill and brand recognition will hopefully help attract new customers. And also our solution will help avoid, as you mentioned, help avoid potential costs such as lawsuits and the frequent death of animals with the poor conditions. So these will hopefully help compensate for some costs that will arise from our solution.
So I'm curious, you suggest we basically spread out the chickens, but they're still going to produce the same amount of waste. I mean, it doesn't change that. There's still all of that running into the groundwater. It doesn't decrease that problem. So I'm curious as to why this will actually have much benefit. Spreading them out doesn't seem to change too much to me.
Yeah, I can answer that. So they would still generate the same amount of waste, but by allowing for them to have more space, they're able to express natural behaviors, which translates to healthier poultry.
Another major reason for this is our solution outlines that there will be less chickens per poultry barn, which means less waste per poultry barn. Also, by spreading out the operations, it will make waste management a lot easier, because, as I'm sure you saw in our pictures, when these chickens are one on top of the other, it is incredibly difficult to clean up that waste. And if they're more spread out, it will benefit. It'll make cleaning up that waste easier.
But fewer chickens on a farm is really going to hurt the financial prospects of a farmer. I mean, his revenues are per chicken. And if you have fewer on a particular farm, he's going to lose money. And I don't think these chicken farmers really make much money at any rate. So I'm just concerned about the whole sort of financial ramifications of I understand why you would want to suggest this, but does it make economic sense for all of us?
Hello. So that actually goes towards a point that I believe Nicole made, in that if the outputs are decreased, then farmers will have to be paid more per pound. So it'll help compensate for that. And again, by awarding environmental bonuses for environmental performance, that should also help to address that financial pressure that the farmers face.
I'm concerned about whether you're seeing us realistically. We have 34,000 McDonald's around the world. We have 69 million people a day being fed by our companies, by our shops. And while we have had some EPA issues, given the magnitude of the work that we're doing, given the reach and outreach that we have, how did your research indicate that our EPA issues were higher or more of a problem than any company that does what we do at the magnitude that we do it?
So part of the reason why we focus on McDonald's is because you are an industry leader, as you know, and by your incredibly high market share. And again, because you have so many operations, and because you are such a force in the fast food industry, it's really your company has the power to create change and hold yourselves accountable. And that's what makes it even more important.
Any more questions?
Yeah, just one more. What about
Go ahead,
the,
Justin.
oh, no problem. What about the consideration of cost increases to our customers and the ability for them to buy the food that we know the public needs to afford? I mean, many people cannot afford to go to the grocery store or even access one. If we increase the cost of food even a few cents, this could force people to go hungry.
That is a great consideration, and there is in many ways an ethical trade-off because yes, there are many people who are low income who rely on McDonald's or who don't have grocery stores near them. However, the community that this impacts are poor rural communities who have less access to healthcare and are less likely to have health insurance. So while, it's either, yes, the price can increase and that might affect people. However, your actions are also impacting a disproportionately poor community who has, again, less access to healthcare. So there is in a way an ethical trade-off. However, there are other solutions to the issue of food security rather than McDonald's. If that is something that you really care about, there are other ways of going about addressing that issue, such as donating to food pantries or supporting causes that address that issue. But there's no other solution to this ethical issue that we have brought up other than for you to attack it directly.
Maria, did you want to say something?
Yeah, I was just going to ask the last question if we have a moment. So we've mentioned our consumers, and I'm wondering if in your research you found that these particular issues, whether it's chicken welfare or even the CAFOs, are a huge concern for our target market.
Yeah, I guess I can answer that one. So we didn't really put this in the presentation, but research has shown that the audience that is most affected by the like gases coming from these CFOs are children, because they take in about like 20 to 50% more air than adults do. And I feel like McDonald's primary audience probably is like younger children because of like the appeal of like the fast food and as well as like the Happy Meals. So I feel like in general, parents would prioritize their children's health more so over than like a slight increase in costs due to like creating turning these CAFOs into AFOs.
Thank you.
If
Yeah,
there-
over to you.
If there are no more questions, we will end this portion of the presentation. And we will go into our own roles, giving you feedback for the work that you have done. I just want to say that this was a really significant project and not easy, and that you're all freshmen is something that is just awesome, that you have taken something so difficult and complex and that you researched it in a number of very interesting ways. Before I give, specific feedback, I just wanted to set the tone that congratulations for how hard you clearly worked and how effective your slides and some other things were. But I'll come back later and want to invite our judges to share their thoughts.
I would add my congratulations. It was a great presentation. You've done a lot of work. I think from a sort of business perspective, I'm a former biotech life science company CEO. And as a CEO, it's always the toughest thing to balance all the competing sort of interests and costs and come up with what is fair. And while the shareholders used to be sort of the primary focus, that's long gone. The last 10 years, most CEOs will take what I would describe as a fairly long-term perspective about their organization, and they tend to talk more about the financial health of the organization. And that, of course, leads you into all the ESG sort of criteria, because most of those are not beneficial short-term, but they're really beneficial on the long term. It's a tough challenge. I often actually think something like this, whoever is number 2 in the field, if they introduce much more sustainable practices, it pushes the leader of the field to have to keep up with it. And sometimes it's not the leader who leads, they're defending their sort of position as a leader, and it's people just behind them who can push them to make those changes. And I think that's something that, for the future you want to think about. But I enjoyed listening to you. I also would suggest you think about, the biggest problem in terms of environment is beef. I mean, we are destroying our world because of, especially in America, because of how much beef we eat. And chicken is a much better solution to feeding the world than beef. And that didn't come up in your presentation at all. So there's a much broader picture that can come out. And I hope and encourage that you push on a project like this to make the whole world much more aware of it, because it's the direction we all have to go in.
I'll jump in. As somebody who's sat where you sat today, I know the feelings you went through in preparation. I know how nerve-wracking it can be, and I'd say you prepared very well. Appreciated hearing from all of you. Couple of thoughts I think that would have increased maybe the power of your suggestion. I think there were some options to take the business and make it into both include the ethical piece behind it as sort of a long-term look. So the cost analysis on litigation resulting from environmental infractions is something that you could have spent a little bit more time on. Also, the death of the animals is certainly an ethical consideration, and nobody wants to see any living creature die. But also there's a cost associated with that, where if you could do a cost analysis of, well, we had X number of chickens die, and had we had them or given them more space, we would have saved this amount of money. And then if you take that a little bit further into by increasing the number of chicken houses, we are creating jobs, and we're creating long-term jobs for people in rural, poorer communities, which was a big, ethical consideration you brought up earlier, the health and well-being of folks living in areas that don't make as much money or have access to care. If you give them a better financial outlook and sort of standpoint to operate from, then you are thinking about the situation more broadly and in the benefit of everybody. Yeah, and I'll leave it at that. Thank you very much for your time today.
Yeah, I agree with everything that the fellow judges have said. I'm also, as Gail is, very impressed that you all are freshmen. I have a sophomore in college, and I can't imagine her being able to kind of sit in front of all of us and discuss such a difficult topic, especially on Zoom. I know it's a lot harder with the virtual world, so congratulations. Great job on that. I liked how you all balanced each person's role. I thought that was great. You all had something to contribute, so that was fabulous. It also was a very difficult topic. I'm not sure there's a very, very simple answer. I think one maybe feedback would be, we kind of bounced around a little bit between the CAFO and that the environmental impact, and then the chicken health and welfare. And I was at times I was a little bit confused at what, kind of your problem statement was and how your solution would impact both of those problem statements. So that's just one kind of piece of feedback. And in terms of the CAFOs, it might have been interesting to hear about some, kind of scientific solutions to those rather than just less chickens, more land. Are there certain types of waste treatment that we could have considered, and what that might have looked like? But other than that, great job, and really appreciated learning about this important topic.
What I wanted to have us now turn to is, you've got a 10-minute presentation tomorrow. As you know, it's no surprise, right? And you've only got 10 minutes to speak about ethics. And what I liked about your presentation, you devoted a significant amount of time to ethics, which is great. More than you'll have a chance tomorrow. So you might want to be thinking about, you're being asked to show how your ethical aspects of the problem and your solution are going to handle successfully the ethical issues. As you heard yourselves today presenting, do you already know the 2 or 3 things, 3 or 4, whatever, that you think are the most compelling, that keep it focused very much on, you don't have to deal with the business aspect, you don't have to deal with the legal, but you do have to really figure out how you can take a market leader who's had a huge number, not that it would be appropriate, to mention it, a huge number of ethical problems. How you could, if you were talking to a board, use the kind of approach that allows you to bring out the very best of the significant amount of information you have. Do you have any thoughts on that? About what you would really feel is the most important that you could say? Who's going to be doing it tomorrow?
It's going to be me, Molly, and Martha doing it
Okay.
tomorrow. The most important ones, we definitely, I think, would want to bring up the fact that the communities surrounding CFOs are mostly like more rural communities, and how they are affected and less likely to have access to healthcare to combat the negative effects of CFOs. I think that definitely will be a point we'll make tomorrow.
So can I make a suggestion? When you have only 10 minutes, simplify what you cover and make it one person covers one thing, there's another, and there's another. So you don't have all the backwards and forwards on stuff. And to me, the most important thing is there's a clear, what's the problem? What is the solution to the problem? And why is it a good solution and it will work? I mean, in 10 minutes, you can't cover too much more than that. And I would also strongly suggest, up front, you can't describe yourselves in great detail. You haven't got the time to do. It's what's the problem? What's the answer to that? And why is it the best answer? And it will work.
You might want to consider how you position McDonald's in terms of their leadership. And when I looked at their website, I didn't have a chance to go into it in depth. You all probably did, but they talk about, in their mission statement, they talk about looking at kind of a bigger picture. And it seems to me that much of what you talked about is the bigger picture of not just a company, but how a corporate leader has, through the choices that they make, real impact, which is obviously going to lead to more client, more money and more benefits for them. You did a good job of talking about benefits. As you think about the benefits for the ethical solution, if you haven't already, you might want to consider how you can position that in terms of McDonald's being considered, the kind of leader that it's supposed to be, which makes it more palatable for a board to be hearing these solutions. Does that make sense? I mean, you've got good solutions and you talked a lot about benefits, but I'm just wondering how you can find one or two, as Allison suggested, really salient benefits that are really, really significant, that you might have glossed over a little bit today, or that you might, by looking, at how they position themselves, again, you might see something that is an angle that could give additional power to what you're saying. Does that make sense? If you don't, does anyone, any other comments from the judges before we ask if the very impressive crusading consultants have any questions of us as real people? Okay, do you all have any questions you want to ask us to be of benefit to what you're doing tomorrow? Nicole, you're on mute, so we can't hear you.
Oh, I was just saying I don't have any questions. That's all I was saying. But so it's, I guess, just for clarification though, it's just tomorrow would just be the problem, solution, and then the ethical implications of that.
Yeah, I mean, let me just quickly read you what you've been called back by the company you gave your full presentation to for a second visit, and you might start by saying, because you're playing in a role, thank you for inviting us back. And then McDonald's has asked you only to speak about the ethical aspects of the problem and to explain why your solution successfully handles any ethical issues. So no bogging things down by cost or by legal or by anything. As Allison pointed out, you've got 10 minutes to make your case about your the ethical aspects and the problem. There won't be any questions and answers after that, and you won't be able to use your slides and videos. And you've already figured out that you're going to have it says you shouldn't have more than 2 or 3 members of your team do this, and you've already figured that out. So you kind of need to reframe your mindset. You did the big picture today, and I've seen, and I'm sure the other judges have too, people who teams that felt they needed to spend a few minutes giving context to what the big picture is. But keep in mind, you're talking, it won't be to us, but you're talking hypothetically to the same people that you had talked with, before. So you don't need to waste any time, but you need to be powerful about your message regarding the issue and the solution and your solution.
Thank you.
Well, if no one has anything else to say, I think we all want to thank you for a really well researched. I'm just curious, when did you start working on this?
I think it was mid-February, I think.
So you've been pretty intensive. Now, is Holy Cross, you're on campus now, all of you, or yeah? So this is a challenging time to be spending the amount of time that you spent on this, but it shows that you spent a lot of time. So congratulations. Thanks very much. And if there's nothing else, you're free to breathe deeply and chalk up. A very, very impressive. Is this the first time that Holy Cross has, no, because you're freshmen, this is totally brand new to you. So that's just amazing that you all did what you did. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
And thank you to the judges. You guys were great.
Gail, will we get a